Hello, welcome along to episode 244 of Adventures in Pop. My name is Simon Jacobs, and you are very welcome, and you look like you're ready for the weekend. So, in this episode, I just want to talk about one observation that I've had recently walking down my local high street. You might have seen this too, because I'm talking about a very well-known department store and what they had in their window. I was just walking down, minding my own business, came across this large display window in a big department store that sells things really very much at the value end. Obviously, I don't want to mention, no, it's not Prada. It'd be ridiculous. But it does start with a P. Anyway, so in their window, they had a bunch of mannequins wearing kind of retro rock T-shirts, and it was obviously, this season's theme was to kind of go retro rock, and it really struck me as kind of odd. It was as kind of not in sync, because this was about this particular department store, I guess, trying to buy some retro rock cool by stocking these particular T-shirts for the summer. Who were the characters who made up these T-shirts of retro rock? Let me tell you what I saw there. And I'm going to show you some of the pictures as well, because this is kind of interesting. This is about a couple of things, I suppose. One is, this is a comment, I suppose, about the commodification of rock and roll. And what I mean by that is just it's being milked, I guess you could say. It's being milked and cheapened, I think, by its juxtaposition with this particular department store. But it tells you something about how easily bought and sold, old rock and roll vintage memories are these days. Who am I talking about? AC/DC, kind of classic retro rock. You just need to see the AC/DC logo and you kind of, you put in the mood. Fleetwood Mac, Rolling Stones, the Ramones, Queen, Tupac, and most importantly, the one that always has to be part of this kind of retro rock collection, Nirvana. And then, slightly oddly, but far more up to date for the girls, and it's so obvious what they're doing here. For the girls, they can go and get a T-shirt of Ariana Grande or Billie Eilish. And it's odd that those two are so much more kind of contemporary, and all the others are blokes, aren't they? We're talking Nirvana, AC/DC, Fleetwood Mac did have a couple of women in, let's be fair. Guns N' Roses, Rolling Stones, Queen, they're all blokes. And in fact, apart from good old Tupac, what's he doing here? I don't know. And I mean that for his sake. These are all elderly white men, some of whom are no longer with us. So I find it a bit depressing in a number of different ways. One is that these brands, Rolling Stones, Nirvana, Fleetwood Mac, etc., are prepared to sell their brand so cheaply, and that's what makes it feel, commodified. It means you can buy a little chunk of it for not very much. It has cheapened it, I think, in its efforts to try and bask in the glow of, rebellious rock and roll of the past. But the other thing is, I think it goes back to something that I've mentioned earlier, where I talked about in a previous episode, the number of albums in the top 100 album chart that have actually been in the chart, maybe not consecutively, but have been in the chart in total 2 years, 5 years, 10 years, even 20 years in the chart. So such a huge amount of our current best favourite tastes are from this same bunch of retro rock kind of people. Because in that big collection, you would find Nirvana, Nevermind, and you would find Fleetwood Mac, Rumours, and Queen, Greatest Hits, and etc., etc. Maybe not all of them, but Guns N' Roses, Appetite for Destruction, etc. So it's another example of not only the cheap commodification of rock and roll, but it's another example of, we go back to the same legends, icons and heroes of the past over and over and over again. And in doing that, we cannot be at the same time looking forward and looking ahead at what is to come, finding new excitements, finding new Rolling Stones and Fleetwood Macs and Guns N' Roses, for goodness sake, or more Ariana Grandes and Billie Eilishes. Although right now we've got lots of very successful solo women, so we're not really short of them. But wouldn't it be better to be looking forward rather than looking back? And we do this so much, particularly in this country. I guess America might be the same, but it's like we can never get over these, great iconic bands that have sort of lost their meaning because they've just become a t-shirt from a value department store down in my high street. That's it. That's my thought for the day. What I want to do is just give you a little indication of what's coming up around the corner, because there is a lot. So just because I haven't seen you for a week, obviously I haven't just been putting my feet up that much, really. Coming up around the corner in a couple of weeks, there is another single from Goldhawk Foxes called Monsters. It's a little story about monsters, which has already had some success in a different guise. So we'll talk about that. Then there will start to be new material from my next album coming out, probably the end of the month, beginning of September. And that's going to be very exciting. And there's also in the pipeline, finally, and really kind of ready to go pretty soon, a bunch of Rothman and Jacobs tracks, which will make up the final few tracks of the debut Rothman and Jacobs album. So all of these are literally around the corner. And the other thing, which is very interesting, is I had an interview today. I kind of was interviewed today by a YouTuber living in Sydney, Australia, who goes by the name of Indie Over 50. And the conversation really is about people of a slightly more senior age. How are they getting on? What is their adventure in Popland like? So it was a really interesting discussion. And what we've agreed, obviously, is that I can use some of that interview and share it on this channel with you. So that will all be coming up in the next few days. Have a fabulous weekend. You take care. Bye-bye.